ever stop to think, like, how do you actually know what's real? Like,
Yeah.
right now, how do you know for sure that you're not in a simulation?
Oh, yeah.
Today's deep dive is going to make you question pretty much everything
Hmm.
because we're exploring how your brain actually constructs reality.
It's so cool.
Yeah. And so the source material for this deep dive is this article from Stanford University's Wu Tsai Neurosciences Institute.
Okay.
They make a pretty compelling argument that our brains are much less like cameras
Yeah.
and much more like, I don't know, storytellers.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Your brain, it's constantly just bombarded with sensory information.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It would just be totally overwhelming to process like every little detail in real time.
So it takes shortcuts.
Exactly. It combines the sensory input that it's getting with a whole bunch of predictions, assumptions, past experiences
Right.
to create kind of like a best guess
Yeah.
about what's going on.
Oh, that's trippy. So less objective reality, more like brain's interpretation of reality.
Exactly.
Okay, so to really see this in action, let's start with something called the double drift illusion.
Okay.
Have you heard of this one?
Yes.
Okay, so imagine you're looking at two dots on a screen.
Mm,
One dot is stationary, the other is moving just straight up and down.
yeah.
But here's the twist. The moving dot also has this black and white pattern inside it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you got that.
I'm picturing it.
Okay, so now focus on that stationary dot and just tell me what happens to the moving dot.
Okay, so the moving dot looks like it's moving diagonally,
Whoa!
even though I know it's just moving up and down.
Right. It's so weird.
It's very strange.
That's your brain's storytelling at work.
Yes.
So researchers used fMRI to see what was happening inside the brain during this illusion,
Mm-hmm.
and they found that the visual cortex, the part of your brain that's processing what you're seeing,
Right. Oh,
it was actually getting it right.
interesting.
Yeah, it knew that the dot was moving vertically. But my brain decided to go rogue.
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
Your frontal lobe, which is responsible for like the more complex thinking and decision-making,
Okay.
it stepped in and said, hold on a second. Based on everything we know about motion and patterns,
Mm-hmm.
that dot is probably moving diagonally, so let's just go with that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So my brain is picking the more logical story, even if it's not totally accurate.
Exactly.
And this isn't a flaw.
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's actually incredibly useful.
I see.
So our brains have evolved to make these predictions because it helps us react faster and move more smoothly through the world.
So it's like my brain is always trying to anticipate what's going to happen next
Precisely.
to make things easier.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And there's actually another illusion that demonstrates this even more clearly.
Okay.
It's called the flash lag illusion.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so picture that moving dot again, the one that was going up and down, right?
Hmm.
Now, imagine a green dot that just flashes on the screen at the exact moment when that red dot is directly below it.
Okay.
Logically, they should appear aligned, right?
They're in the same position at the same time. Yeah.
But that's not what happens.
Really?
Yeah, so the red dot always seems to be like slightly ahead of the green dot. It's as if your brain is predicting where that red dot will be by the time you consciously see the flash of the green dot.
My brain is like filling in the gaps, basically.
Yes.
So it's showing me what it thinks I should be seeing.
It's giving you the more complete picture.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, and this highlights a really important point.
Okay.
There's a slight delay,
Okay.
about 100 milliseconds, between when something happens in the world and when we actually become aware of it.
Wait, so everything I'm experiencing is happening in the past?
In a way, yes.
That is so crazy to think about.
It is, yeah.
Oh, wow.
But your brain is constantly compensating for this lag time
Okay.
by predicting what will happen next.
It's what?
It's like a continuous movie where your brain is editing in the next scene before the current one is even finished.
So it's not even just about seeing, it's about predicting what I'm going to see next.
Exactly.
Wow, my brain is much more active than I thought.
It absolutely is.
That's incredible.
And this predictive system has huge implications for how we experience the world,
Yeah.
even beyond these visual illusions.
If our brains are constantly making predictions and filling in gaps,
Yeah.
I mean, how much of what we perceive is actually objective?
Yeah.
And how much is actually being influenced by our own brains?
Yeah, it really makes you think. And it's not just motion our brains make predictions about.
Oh, really?
Let's talk about color.
Okay.
Specifically, like how our brains interpret color based on the context.
Okay, color seems pretty straightforward.
Right.
You see a red apple, it's red.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, not always.
Okay.
Remember how we were talking about the brain using those shortcuts
Right.
to create like a more efficient experience.
Yes.
The same thing is actually happening with color perception.
Okay, so my brain isn't always giving me the true color of an object.
Let me show you an example.
Okay.
Take a look at this illusion that was created by Akiyoshi Kitaoka.
All right, I'm seeing it.
Okay.
It's this square that seems to be changing color as it moves across the background.
Right.
But you're saying the color of the square isn't actually changing.
Right. So your brain is taking in information about the surrounding colors,
Right.
the lighting,
Okay.
and it's using that to make a guess about the real color of the square.
So my brain is editing the colors that I see based on the context.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
Think about it this way. If you have like a red apple
Okay.
in bright sunlight,
Uh-huh.
it'll look different than that same apple under a dim lamp.
Right.
Your brain knows that the apple's color hasn't actually changed.
Okay.
So it adjusts your perception
Right.
to account for the different lighting.
That makes sense. It's trying to give me a consistent experience of color.
Yep.
Even when the lighting is tricky, to make sure that I'm not seeing a million different versions of the same apple because the light changes.
It's not about perceiving the precise wavelengths of light.
Uh-huh.
It's about figuring out what the true color of an object is based on the information that your brain has.
Which brings us to the ultimate example of how individual perception can vary. The dress.
Oh, yes.
I remember this.
Yeah.
The internet frenzy.
It was wild.
People were seeing it as either blue and black or white and gold.
I know.
The whole world was arguing about it.
Right.
And speaking of individual experiences, there's this theory that connects the way people saw the dress to something called chronotypes.
Right.
Can you remind me what those are?
Yeah. So you know how some people are morning people?
Yes.
They bounce out of bed?
The early birds?
Yes, exactly. Early birds.
Uh-huh.
And then you have the night owls
Yeah.
who really thrive in the evening.
Yeah.
So those are called chronotypes.
Okay, got it.
So what do chronotypes have to do with the color of a dress?
Yeah, that's the question.
So neuroscientist Pascal Wallish,
Okay.
he suggests that our chronotypes can actually influence our assumptions about the lighting source in an image.
Oh, wow.
So early birds or larks, they tend to be exposed to more daylight, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Daylight has more blue wavelengths.
Okay.
And then night owls, they're more used to artificial light,
Right.
which has more yellow wavelengths.
So if you're a lark, your brain might assume that the photo of the dress was taken in daylight
Yeah,
and then unconsciously filter out some of the blue light
precisely.
and see it as white and gold.
Exactly.
And then a night owl would do the opposite.
Right. So they would assume artificial light, filter out the yellow, and see a blue and black dress.
Wow. Who knew your sleep preferences could influence how you perceive color?
That's so interesting, right?
It really highlights how our experiences, even seemingly unrelated ones,
Yeah.
can just subtly shape how we see the world.
And this actually goes beyond just color perception.
Right.
So Wallish, he argues that this phenomenon applies to much more than just the dress.
Uh-huh.
He actually calls it SRFP.
SRFP.
Yeah, it stands for substantial uncertainty plus ramified forked priors, and assumptions equals disagreement.
Okay, I need you to break that down for me.
Okay, so essentially, when we encounter information that's ambiguous,
Okay.
something that's open to interpretation,
Okay.
our brains fill in those blanks with our own pre-existing beliefs and experiences.
Okay.
And since we all have different experiences,
Right.
we end up perceiving things differently, which can lead to disagreements.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like we're all looking at the same world
Mm-hmm.
through slightly different lenses.
Exactly.
So SRFP isn't just about dresses, it's about how we understand the news,
Right.
political issues, scientific data,
All of it.
if the information is unclear
Yeah.
or open to interpretation. Our pre-existing beliefs and experiences can really influence our conclusions. So two people can be looking at the same evidence,
Yeah.
but because of their different backgrounds and assumptions,
Uh-huh.
they can walk away with totally opposite interpretations.
Exactly. And that can lead to some pretty strong disagreements,
And even polarization,
especially in today's world.
where we're bombarded with information from all sides.
Absolutely.
So how do we deal with that? If
Yeah.
everyone's reality is a little different,
Right.
how can we ever find common ground? So if our brains are always constructing these like personalized realities,
Yeah.
how do we navigate a world where everyone's perception
Right.
is maybe a little bit or a lot different?
Well, I think recognizing this tendency is like the crucial first step.
Okay.
So instead of just assuming our own perceptions are perfectly accurate,
Right.
We have to cultivate a sense of intellectual humility.
So being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Exactly.
That's not always easy.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Our brains, they just naturally gravitate towards confirming what we already believe.
Right.
Filtering out information that challenges our existing views.
It's like we have this built-in filter
Yeah.
that makes us more likely to believe information that already fits with what we think,
Right.
even if it's not actually true,
Yeah. And then we just ignore or reject information that challenges those beliefs.
which can make having productive conversations about controversial topics almost impossible.
Right.
Everyone's just stuck in their own echo chambers,
Exactly.
reinforcing their own version of reality.
It's like that saying, you can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into.
Yes, exactly.
So that's why it's so important to actually seek out diverse perspectives.
Right.
Engage with people who hold different views and really listen with an open mind.
Be willing to maybe even change your mind when you see compelling evidence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not about abandoning our beliefs entirely,
Okay.
but it's about being willing to refine them.
To update our software a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Acknowledge the limitations of our own perspectives.
It's recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
There's always more to learn.
Absolutely. It's like that famous quote, a mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions.
I love that quote.
It's so good.
It's so true.
It perfectly captures the idea that learning and growth require a willingness to be challenged.
Just step outside our comfort zone. Consider different views.
Yeah, which can be uncomfortable.
Of course, no one likes to admit they were wrong.
Right. But I think it's also incredibly liberating.
Oh, for sure.
When we let go of the need to be right all the time,
Yes.
we open ourselves up to a whole new world of understanding and connection.
Yeah, so how do we actually put this into practice in our daily lives?
I think it starts with being more mindful of our own biases,
Okay.
those subtle filters through which we see the world. Pay attention to how your emotions, your experiences, your pre-existing beliefs might be shaping your interpretations.
How do we do that?
Notice when you're really quick to dismiss an opposing viewpoint,
Okay.
or when you're only seeking out information that confirms what you already think.
Okay, so actively look for things that challenge those biases.
Exactly.
Read articles that you don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to people with different backgrounds and experiences.
Yeah, and when you find yourself disagreeing with someone,
Right.
resist that urge to just immediately dismiss their perspective.
Okay.
Try to understand where they're coming from.
What experiences have led them to that conclusion?
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that even when we disagree, there's often a lot more common ground than we realize.
Right. We're all just trying to make sense of this complex world.
We are.
Yeah.
And our brains are just wired to do that in slightly different ways.
And that diversity of thought is actually a strength,
Okay.
not a weakness.
Yeah.
It's through those differences in perception. The clashes of ideas that we can actually refine our own understanding.
And arrive at a more accurate truth.
Exactly.
So this deep dive into how our brains construct reality, it's been both mind-bending and empowering.
Yes.
It's made me realize that the world is not this fixed, objective thing.
Yeah.
It's actually this fluid, dynamic landscape that's shaped by our individual perceptions.
Exactly.
And that while those different perceptions can sometimes lead to disagreements and misunderstandings, they can also lead to greater empathy,
Absolutely.
a more nuanced understanding,
Yeah.
a more vibrant experience of the world.
It's amazing.
So as you go about your day today,
Yeah.
remember to look beyond the surface, question your assumptions,
Yes.
embrace the beauty and the complexity of our shared
Right.
but individually constructed realities.
I love that.
Keep in mind that the world you see is just one interpretation,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that there are countless other perspectives out there waiting to be discovered.
And never underestimate the power of an open mind.
It's true.
Who knows what incredible insights await you when you challenge your own perceptions.
That's a great place to end it. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.